The bus rattled softly as it rolled down the dim road, its windows reflecting the tired faces of passengers who had finished long days and just wanted to get home. Among them sat a young student who looked more exhausted than anyone else on board. His backpack rested between his feet, unzipped and spilling out papers that had been folded and unfolded too many times. He rubbed his eyes over and over as if trying to squeeze energy out of them. The day had taken every last bit of strength from him. He had run from a late class straight to his evening shift, stayed longer than planned when a coworker called in sick, and then rushed to catch the final bus heading out of town. His mind was racing with all the tasks he still had to finish. There were assignments due, bills waiting, and a family situation that always kept him worried. He tried to keep his breathing steady, but the pressure inside him kept building. Across the aisle, a man wearing worn boots and a clean but simple jacket sat quietly. He carried himself with a calm confidence, the kind that comes from years of hard work. Though he dressed simply, something about him stood out. People around seemed to recognize him, even if they pretended not to stare. He was the CEO of a large ranch outside the city, known for treating people fairly and speaking directly. He had never been the type to hide behind fancy suits or big offices. He preferred to be out in the fields with his workers, helping when needed. He watched the student from the corner of his eye, not in a judgmental way, but with a kind of quiet concern. He could see the familiar signs of someone who had reached their limit: shaking hands, tight breathing, and eyes that had carried too much for too long. The student flipped through his notes again. Though none of the words seemed to make sense anymore, his vision blurred, and he blinked several times. The pages shook slightly in his hands, and he tucked them back into his bag. Pressing the zipper closed, even though papers still stuck out, the bus jerked a little at a turn, and the student grabbed the seat in front of him to steady himself. He whispered something to himself, maybe a reminder, maybe a plea to stay awake. His head felt heavy. His chest felt tight. The ranch CEO finally leaned slightly toward him and spoke in a low, calm voice. "Long day." The student gave a weak laugh, but it quickly broke into a small breath of frustration. "It feels never-ending," he said softly. "I'm trying, but everything just keeps piling up. Work, school, home. I don't know how much longer I can keep this going." He didn't say anything right away. He didn't offer empty advice or pretend to know everything. He simply listened, which was something the student hadn't experienced in a long time. "Sometimes life does that," the CEO finally said. "Comes at you from all sides. And sometimes it's okay to sit back for a moment and let yourself rest." The student looked at him, surprised by the gentleness in the man's voice. He opened his mouth to respond, but the exhaustion hit him in a sudden wave. His eyes welled up with tears. He tried to blink away, but one slipped down his cheek before he could hide it. He quickly looked down, embarrassed. He wiped his face with the sleeve of his hoodie. "Sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to. Don't apologize," the CEO said softly. "You're tired. Anyone can see that." The student nodded but didn't trust himself to speak again. He leaned back in his seat and stared at the ceiling of the bus, trying to breathe evenly. But the more he tried to hold himself together, the harder it became. His shoulders shook a little as he tried to wipe away more tears before anyone noticed. The CEO noticed, but instead of drawing attention to it, he shifted slightly and spoke in a warm, steady tone. "You can rest if you want. No one here is going to judge you." He hesitated for a second before adding, "If you need a place to lean, you've got one right here." The student looked at him again. Confused, the man tapped his own shoulder gently. It wasn't a dramatic gesture, just a simple human offer from one person to another. The student let out a shaky breath. For the first time in a long while, someone wasn't asking him to be strong. Someone wasn't pushing him. Someone was simply giving him space to be tired. After a few seconds of hesitation, he nodded. He took off his backpack and slid it under the seat. His body felt heavier than ever. When he carefully leaned to the side, resting his head on the CEO's shoulder, he felt a mixture of embarrassment and relief. "You're okay," the CEO said quietly, almost like he was speaking to a younger version of himself. "Just breathe. You're safe." The student didn't answer. He didn't need to. His breaths slowly softened. The tension in his body eased, little by little, as the rhythm of the bus mixed with the sense of safety beside him. Within minutes, he was asleep. The CEO adjusted slightly, making sure the student didn't slip or wake up from discomfort. He reached for the light jacket he had folded beside him earlier and draped it gently over the student's shoulders. His movements were careful, almost fatherly. A few passengers looked at the scene, surprised, but no one said anything. Some even smiled softly, recognizing a moment of kindness that felt rare in the world. The CEO stared out the window, watching the dark fields pass by. His mind wandered back to his own younger days, nights spent working late, mornings waking up exhausted, and moments when he wished someone had been there to help him. He saw a bit of himself in the student. The same pressure, the same loneliness, the same feeling of carrying burdens that weren't meant for one person alone. He didn't know the student's full story. He didn't know what had pushed him to that point. But he knew one thing clearly. No young person should have to carry that weight alone. The bus continued down the road as the night grew colder outside. Inside, the air was warm and quiet. The student's breathing settled into a slow, steady rhythm. The kind that only came when someone had finally let their guard down. The CEO didn't move. He didn't say anything. He simply let the student rest, keeping still so he wouldn't disturb him. The bus had several stops left before reaching the final one. But for now, in that calm moment, two strangers sat side by side, one resting for the first time in far too long, and the other quietly watching over him. And though neither of them knew it yet, this simple moment, this unexpected breakdown on a late-night bus, was about to change both of their lives in ways neither could have imagined. The bus kept moving along the quiet road, its engine humming gently as the night grew deeper outside. Inside, the dim lights stayed steady, giving the space a calm glow. The student remained asleep on the ranch CEO's shoulder, completely unaware of how tired he had been until that moment. His breaths were slow and soft, the kind that only came when someone finally let go of everything they'd been holding inside. The CEO stayed still, careful not to disturb him. He wasn't used to moments like this, moments where a stranger leaned on him like he was someone safe. But instead of feeling uncomfortable, he felt something else, a quiet sense of purpose. He had seen people break before. Life had a way of pushing too hard at the wrong time. But seeing someone so young reach that point hit him differently. It reminded him of things he didn't talk about often. Across the aisle, a woman glanced in their direction. She had seen the whole thing, the breakdown, the quiet offer, the student's exhausted collapse. She gave the CEO a small smile, the kind that thanked him without words. He nodded politely in return. Outside, streetlights passed like slow-moving stars, blinking across the windows. The bus driver kept his eyes on the road, not saying a word, but he glanced into his mirror every now and then. Even he seemed touched by the scene behind him. The student shifted slightly in his sleep, and the CEO adjusted his shoulder so the young man's head rested more comfortably. The jacket he had draped over the student slipped a little, so he pulled it up again, making sure he stayed warm. The gesture was simple, but there was a quiet care in it, like he was looking after someone he already felt responsible for. Minutes stretched into almost an hour. The bus stopped twice, letting passengers step out, stretch, or head home. Each time, the CEO stayed seated, not wanting to wake the sleeping student. When someone bumped the seat by accident while getting off, the CEO placed a protective hand near the student's arm, making sure he didn't jolt awake. The student didn't move at all. It was clear his body was catching up on days, maybe weeks of lost sleep. Eventually, the bus grew nearly empty. Only a few passengers remained, scattered in different seats. The lights outside the windows became fewer as the city thinned and the quieter outskirts approached. The CEO looked down at the student, who still slept deeply. He wondered what weight the young man carried that pushed him to such a breakdown. Work, studies, family? Something else? He didn't need details to see the pressure had been heavy. He sighed softly, remembering nights from his own past. Nights when he had driven tractors until dawn because he needed the money. Nights when rain soaked his clothes and chilled him to the bone. Nights when he didn't know if he would be able to keep the ranch alive after his father passed. Back then, no one had been around to offer a shoulder. He had faced it alone. Maybe that was why this moment meant something to him. Maybe it was why he didn't move. After another long stretch of silence, the bus finally slowed again. The driver announced the final stop, his voice low and calm. The CEO gently tapped the student's arm. "Hey," he said softly, "we're almost there." The student stirred. His eyebrows drew together as if waking up from a dream he didn't want to leave. Slowly, he lifted his head, blinking a few times as the world came back into focus. When he realized he had been leaning on a stranger the entire time, he sat up straight in embarrassment. I'm so sorry," he said quickly, rubbing his face. "I didn't mean to fall asleep on you." "I didn't mean to. It's fine," the CEO said. "You needed it." The student looked away, still embarrassed. His cheeks grew warm. "I must have knocked out really hard."
You did.
The CEO replied with a small chuckle. Didn't even move for close to an hour. That only made the student feel more embarrassed. "I'm sorry," he said again. "Stop apologizing," the CEO said gently. "You didn't do anything wrong." The bus came to a full stop, and the lights turned up slightly. The last few passengers stood and started collecting their bags. The student reached for his backpack, but the zipper had come undone again, and loosely folded papers slid out onto the floor. He quickly bent down to gather them. His movements rushed. The CEO bent down to help. "Slow down," he said. "They're not going anywhere," the student sighed as he gathered the papers. "I can't seem to keep my life organized lately." "It happens," the CEO said simply. "More often than you'd think." When the student stood up, he looked even more drained than before he slept. Sleep had given him rest, but it hadn't solved the deeper problems weighing him down. "You heading home?" The CEO asked. The student hesitated. "I don't really have a place tonight." The CEO raised an eyebrow, not out of judgment but concern. "No place at all?" "Just temporary issues," the student said quickly. "It's fine. I'll figure something out." But it wasn't fine. Anyone could hear that. The CEO took a deep breath. "Look, I'm not trying to invade your space, but I can't just leave you like this. You look exhausted, and it's late. My truck is right outside. I can take you somewhere safe." The student's eyes widened a little. "You don't have to do that. You've already done more than enough." "I know," the CEO said. "But I want to help." The student looked torn. He didn't want to be a burden. He didn't want to look like someone who needed rescuing. But the truth was, he didn't have options left tonight. "Where would you take me?" he asked quietly. "Someplace safe," the CEO replied. "My ranch isn't far from here. You can rest in a guest room and figure things out after you've slept properly. No pressure, no questions, unless you want to talk." The student blinked in surprise. "Your ranch?" "Yes," the CEO said as he lifted his jacket and stood. "It's quiet, warm, and not full of people. Just a calm place to breathe." The student looked toward the dark outside the bus, then back at the man offering help. Everything in him wanted to refuse out of pride. But everything in him also knew he had nowhere else to go. He swallowed hard. "Are you sure it's okay?" "If it wasn't, I wouldn't offer," the CEO replied. The student nodded slowly. "Okay, thank you." They stepped off the bus together. The cool night air brushed against their faces. The parking area was nearly empty, with only a few cars scattered around. The sky above was wide and quiet, dotted with faint stars. The CEO walked ahead a step, leading the way toward a sturdy truck parked near the edge. "Hop in," he said, unlocking the doors. The student climbed into the passenger seat, clutching his backpack close. The inside of the truck was clean but well used, with the faint smell of hay and old leather. It felt strangely comforting. The CEO started the engine, and the headlights lit up the road ahead. As they pulled out of the lot, the student let out a long breath he had been holding in. For the first few minutes, neither of them spoke. The road stretched out ahead, quiet and mostly empty. After a while, the CEO glanced over. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to. But if you feel like talking, I'm here." The student stared out the window. The wind outside brushed softly against the glass. "I'm just tired," he said finally. tired of trying to do everything. Tired of feeling like I'm failing at all of it? The CEO nodded thoughtfully. That's a heavy load to carry on your own. Feels like no matter how much I push myself, it's never enough, the student said. School, work, helping my family. Every day feels like I'm chasing something I can't catch. I've felt that before, the CEO said quietly. The student looked at him in surprise. You have? Yes, the CEO replied. People look at me now and see success. But they don't see the years when I thought I was going to lose everything. Times when I slept in my truck because going home didn't feel like an option. I know what it feels like to hit your limit. The student absorbed the words slowly. Hearing someone accomplished admit to struggling made him feel a little less alone. Life can push you hard, the CEO continued. But it doesn't mean you're weak for needing help. Everyone needs help sometimes. The student looked down at his hands. I guess I just didn't expect to fall apart like that. Especially not on a bus. You didn't fall apart, the CEO said. You reached a point where your body said it needed rest. That happens when you care too much and work too hard. They drove in silence for a few moments, the sound of the engine filling the quiet. Thank you, the student said softly, for not judging me, for letting me sleep, for all of this. You don't have to thank me, the CEO said. Sometimes people cross paths for a reason. Maybe tonight you just needed someone to be there, and I was in that seat. The road began to change as they neared the countryside. Trees lined the sides, and the sky opened wider above them. The student felt something loosen in his chest, a small but noticeable shift. You're safe now, the CEO said as he turned onto a long, quiet road leading toward his ranch. We'll get you settled for the night. Tomorrow is a new day. The student nodded, feeling the weight of the past weeks slowly fading, not gone but lighter. As if someone else was helping carry it, the truck rolled deeper into the peaceful night, toward a place the student never expected to end up, a place that would soon give him more than a warm room, a place that would quietly start changing the course of his life. The truck moved steadily along the quiet countryside road, its headlights cutting through the darkness as the ranch fields stretched far into the night. The student sat with his backpack on his lap, fingers gripping the straps without realizing it. He felt nervous, not because he feared the man driving, but because the kindness he had been shown felt unreal. He wasn't used to anyone caring this much, especially a stranger. The ranch CEO kept his eyes on the road, giving the student space to breathe. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was calm, almost peaceful. The only sounds were the soft rumble of the engine and the occasional rustle of wind against the windows. After a while, CEO spoke gently, breaking the quiet. You holding up okay? The student nodded, though his voice came out softer than he expected. Yeah, just thinking. That's a dangerous habit at this hour, the CEO said with a small smile. Your mind likes to make trouble when you're tired. The student gave a light laugh, the kind that still carried a hint of sadness. Mine definitely does. They passed a wooden sign at the side of the road. The student couldn't read it clearly in the dark, but he could tell the letters were carved by hand. We're close, the CEO said. The ranch entrance is just ahead.
The student raised his head a little, looking out into the darkness.
He expected a large gate or something grand, but what appeared instead was simple. A long gravel driveway with lantern-style lights lined along the side, leading toward a cluster of warm, glowing windows in the distance. The truck turned onto the driveway, and the crunch of gravel beneath the tires echoed softly. It's peaceful out here, the student said quietly. It is, the CEO replied. Peace helps you think clearer, helps you breathe. They drove toward a wide house built from wood and stone. It wasn't fancy, but it looked sturdy and warm, like a place that had held many good memories and maybe some hard ones too. Several smaller buildings sat nearby, likely barns or storage sheds. The faint smell of hay drifted through the air as the truck rolled to a stop. The CEO turned off the engine. Come on, he said. Let's get you settled. The student stepped out of the truck, his legs stiff from sitting so long. The night felt cooler here, but the quietness wrapped around him like a blanket. He took a slow breath, noticing how fresh the air smelled compared to the city. The CEO grabbed his jacket and motioned. for the student to follow him up the wooden porch. The steps creaked softly under their feet. He unlocked the door and pushed it open. Warm light spilled into the night. "Go ahead," the CEO said. The student stepped inside, surprised by the simplicity of the home. Wooden floors, soft lighting, a few framed pictures on the walls, and furniture that looked well used but cared for. It felt lived in, not decorated to impress anyone. "Sit wherever you want," the CEO said as he hung his jacket on a hook. "Let me get you something warm to drink." "You don't have to, I know," the CEO interrupted gently. "But I want to." The student nodded and sat on the edge of a large couch. His backpack rested at his feet again, half unzipped, papers still threatening to spill out. He looked around the room, noticing boots by the door and a row of hats hanging on the wall. Everything felt steady, grounded. A few minutes later, the CEO returned with 2 mugs of warm tea. "I figured you'd need something to help you calm down from the day," he said as he handed one over. The student wrapped his hands around the mug. "Thank you for everything." The CEO sat down across from him. "You don't need to keep thanking me," he said kindly. "Just drink, then get some sleep." The student took a slow sip. The warmth eased the tightness in his chest. After a quiet moment, the CEO spoke again. "If you want to talk about what's going on, I'm here. If not, that's fine too. I won't push." The student stared into the cup, watching the steam rise. "My life's just been too much lately," he said finally. "I'm trying to study, trying to work enough hours to support myself and help my family a little. But everything's been slipping. I haven't been sleeping. I barely eat sometimes because I'm running around so much." The CEO listened, his face calm and understanding. "I thought if I pushed harder, things would get better," the student continued. "But it's like the more I try, the more everything falls apart." "It sounds like you've been carrying a lot on your own," the CEO said. The student nodded. "I didn't want to ask for help. I didn't want to seem weak." The CEO leaned back in his chair. "Needing help doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Everyone needs support sometimes, especially when they're trying to build a future." The student swallowed hard. "Today I felt like I couldn't hold anything together anymore." "I saw that," the CEO said gently, "and there's no shame in it. Your body made you stop. That's its way of protecting you." The student looked up, meeting the CEO's eyes. There was no judgment, there's just quiet understanding. The CEO set his mug down. "You don't have to stay long. Just tonight. Just enough to rest. This place is safe. Safe." The word felt foreign to the student. But the more he sat there, the more real it felt. "Thank you," he said again. But this time the words carried less embarrassment and more genuine relief. The CEO nodded once. "Come on, I'll show you the guest room." The student followed him down a short hallway. The walls were lined with old photographs, people working in fields, horses running across open land. A younger version of the CEO standing next to an older man who had the same steady eyes. The CEO opened a door and flicked on the light. "Here you go." The room was simple but clean. A soft bed, a small dresser, and a window that looked out toward the quiet fields. "You can use anything you need," the CEO said. "Blankets, towels, everything's in the closet." The student stepped inside, feeling a wave of exhaustion crash over him again now that he knew he had somewhere to sleep. "I don't know how to repay you," he said softly. "You don't need to," the CEO replied. "Just rest. That's enough." The student placed his backpack on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. His body felt heavy, but in a way that meant he finally felt safe enough to let himself drop. "If you need anything, good night." "Good night," the student said. The CEO turned off the hallway light and walked away, leaving the student alone in the small, warm room. The student lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The silence was almost too peaceful. He wasn't used to quiet moments. Usually, his nights were filled with noise machines humming at work, people talking loudly, his own thoughts running wild. But here, everything felt still. He pulled the blanket over himself and took a deep breath. He could still feel the warmth of the tea inside him. He closed his eyes, letting the exhaustion take over. Sleep came quickly, like someone had lifted all the weight off his shoulders. Meanwhile, the CEO remained in the living room for a while, sitting quietly with his thoughts. He wasn't sure why he felt so protective of the student, but something about him struck a chord. Maybe it was the familiar, tired eyes. Maybe it was the way the student tried so hard to stay strong, even when he was clearly hurting. The CEO took a long breath, then turned off the lights and headed to his own room. The night passed peacefully, just before dawn. Soft light began slipping through the guest room window. Birds chirped quietly outside, waking the farm animals scattered across the property. The student stirred, feeling the gentle warmth of sunlight on his face. It took him a moment to remember where he was. When he finally opened his eyes, he blinked at the unfamiliar ceiling. Then the memories turned: the bus, the breakdown, the shoulder he had cried on, the long drive, the ranch, and the quiet guest room. He sat up slowly, surprised by how rested he felt. It had been a long time since he slept through the night without waking up from stress. He swung his legs off the bed and stood, stretching his stiff muscles. He glanced at his backpack on the floor and frowned at the thought of his messy life waiting inside it. Papers everywhere. Responsibilities everywhere. But for the first time in a while, he didn't feel crushed by them. He walked to the window instead. Outside, the early sun painted the fields in shades of gold. Horses grazed in the distance, and the air looked clean and soft. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to feel calm. A knock sounded on the door. "You awake?" the CEO's voice said from the hallway. "Yeah," the student replied. The door opened gently. The CEO stood there, already dressed and ready for the day. "Morning," he said with a small smile. "Breakfast is ready when you are." The student nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest that surprised him. "Thank you." "Come eat," the CEO said. "We've got a long day, and you need the energy." The student followed him out of the room, unaware that this quiet morning was only the beginning. The ranch would give him more than rest. It would give him direction, comfort, and a chance to rebuild. And the CEO had no idea how much helping one tired student would change his own life as well. The next morning brought a quiet kind of peace across the ranch, the kind that made the air feel soft and safe. The student woke up slowly, still wrapped in the blanket the ranch workers had placed over him the night before. For a moment, he didn't move. He simply listened. There was the low hum of animals waking up, the distant sound of a gate closing, and the gentle whistling of wind running across open fields. His eyes blinked open to the sight of sunlight. Creeping through the wooden blinds, it painted warm lines across the room, making everything look calmer than he felt inside. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, still trying to understand how he had ended up in a warm bed instead of the bus stop bench, where he had cried until he fell asleep. He remembered leaning on the ranch CEO's shoulder, breaking down without planning to. He remembered the man's quiet voice telling him it was okay. He remembered being helped into the truck, but he didn't remember reaching the ranch house or being tucked into bed. He stepped out of the room and walked into the hallway. Everything smelled like fresh bread and warm tea. It made him feel strange, like he had stepped into a place that wasn't his. When he reached the kitchen door, he stopped. The CEO was there, standing at the counter with a mug in his hand. He looked tired in a gentle way, with soft lines under his eyes, as if he'd stayed awake checking on the boy. The moment he noticed him, he offered a small, calm smile. "Morning," the CEO said, not pushing, not questioning. The student nodded, unsure if he should sit or speak first. So he just stood there, tense, until the CEO gestured to the chair. "Sit. You don't have to rush into anything. Breakfast is almost ready." The student sat down slowly, still uncertain. His eyes drifted to the open window, where he could see the ranch hands walking around outside. They were feeding animals, carrying hay, moving like it was just another normal day. He wondered if anyone there knew he had been found crying on a bus bench. The CEO placed a plate of warm food in front of him. Bread, eggs, something simple but full. The student stared at it for a moment before finally picking up the fork. "You slept deeply," the CEO said lightly, taking a seat across from him. "Didn't move once." You must have been very tired. The student swallowed. I didn't mean to fall asleep on you, he said in a small voice. I know, the CEO replied gently. And it's fine. There was something steady in the man's tone that made the student's eyes drop. He took a bite of the food. It was warm, soft, and tasted like something he hadn't had in months. Dash comfort. For a few minutes, neither spoke. The CEO simply sipped his tea, letting the silence be easy. Finally, the man asked, So, what happened? Only if you want to talk. The student froze. His stomach tightened. He wasn't ready to explain everything, but he also felt like he owed the man something. He took a breath. I didn't mean to break down, he whispered. I just got overwhelmed. I've been trying to keep up with school and work. And rent. And then the bus was delayed again. And I thought I'd miss class. And I hadn't slept properly. I don't know. It all hit me at once. The CEO listened quietly, not changing expressions or interrupting, and I haven't told anyone how hard it's been. Not even my friends, because everyone else seems to be managing, and I don't want to be the one who can't handle things. The CEO nodded slowly, like he understood every bit of that. You're not weak, he said softly. You're exhausted. That's different. The student looked down at his hands. It was strange to hear someone say that so plainly. There was more he wanted to say, but the words stayed stuck. He didn't want to seem dramatic, or ungrateful, or childish. Seeing him struggle, the CEO changed the topic slightly. He said, tapping his mug lightly, you're not the first student who's gotten overwhelmed out here. I've hired a lot of young people over the years. Life gets heavy. It's okay to admit that. The student exhaled slowly. Something inside him loosened. After breakfast, the CEO stood up and motioned for him to follow. Come on. Let me show you around a bit. Fresh air might help. The student followed him out of the warm kitchen into the bright, open morning. The ranch stretched far in every direction, glowing under the sunlight. Horses grazed near a fence. A few workers waved at the CEO. He pointed toward a small barn. That one over there holds the younger animals. They need more care, so the team spends extra time there. The student listened politely, but his eyes wandered. Everything here moved at its own gentle pace. No rushing. No endless noise. It made him feel like he could breathe again. After a few minutes of walking, the CEO stopped near a quiet corner of the land. From there, they could see the open fields, soft with morning light. This place helped me, the CEO said suddenly. A long time ago, when I was young and felt lost, the student turned to him, surprised. The man continued, I know people think someone like me has never struggled, but life was heavy for me too. I came here to clear my head. Ended up staying. Student didn't know what to say. The idea that this calm, confident man had once been overwhelmed too made him feel less alone. The CEO looked at him with sincerity. So you don't have to pretend to be fine here. Not with me. Those words hit deeper than the student expected. He swallowed hard, feeling his throat tighten. As they walked back toward the house, one of the ranch workers jogged over. Boss, the truck needs a quick check before the supply run, the worker said. The CEO nodded. I'll be there in a moment. Then he turned back to the student. Why don't you rest a bit? Or sit outside? No pressure. The student nodded and walked toward the porch. He sat down on the wooden steps, looking out at the land. For the first time in weeks, he didn't feel like he was drowning, but inside him, something else stirred fear of what came next. How long could he stay? What if he was becoming a burden? What if he had already taken too much from a man who owed him nothing? He folded his hands tightly. While he sat there, the CEO walked back over. Wiping his hands with a cloth after checking the truck, I've been thinking, the man said casually, if you're planning to go back to the city today, you don't have to rush. The student blinked. You mean, I can stay? If you want to, the CEO replied. You can rest today. There's space. There's food. No demands. No pressure, just time to breathe. The student felt a strange mix of relief and confusion. But why would you do all that for me? The CEO met his eyes, firm but kind, because kindness doesn't need a reason. And yesterday, you needed help, so I helped. Those words touched something deep inside the student, something tired and hungry for understanding. He nodded slowly. Thank you. The CEO smiled. Good, now relax. This place isn't going anywhere. The student watched him walk away to join the workers again, feeling something warm settle in his chest. For the first time in what felt like forever, he felt safe, and he didn't know it yet. But this day would change even more than the night before. The rest of the day moved slowly, in a peaceful way the student wasn't used to. After breakfast and the quiet walk across the ranch, he spent some time sitting on the porch, letting the calm settle around him. The sun hung high in the sky, warm but not harsh. And the air smelled of grass and dust and something steadying. He watched the workers move around with simple rhythm-feeding animals, fixing fences, talking softly to each other as they worked. It wasn't like the noise and rush of the city. Nothing here felt like a race. Nothing demanded that he hold himself together every second. For a long moment, he just breathed, letting the weight in his chest ease little by little. Eventually, the CEO walked toward him again, less rushed now that the morning tasks were handled. He had a bottle of cold water in one hand, and he set it beside the student before sitting down on the porch steps. Feeling any better? The man asked quietly. The student nodded, though part of him was still unsure. A bit. It's different here, calm. Good, the CEO said. You needed a place to slow down. The student took a small sip of the water, noticing how even that felt grounding. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, it felt safe, like they were both allowed to just exist without pressure. After a minute, the CEO leaned back on his hands and looked out at the land. You know, he said in a gentle tone, a lot of young people come through this ranch at some point. Some stay for a few days, some for months. Sometimes they just need a place to rest. Sometimes they learn something here that helps them later. The student listened quietly. It's not weakness to need a break, the CEO continued. It's human. Those words settled deeply in the student. He didn't know why they made his eyes feel warm, but they did. I didn't think anyone would understand, the student admitted softly. Everyone I know seems to be stronger or better at hiding things. The CEO shook his head gently. Most people hide their struggles. Doesn't mean they're not hurting. You just reached a point where you couldn't carry everything alone. That's not failure. The student looked down at his hands again, twisting them together. I didn't want to bother anyone. You're not bothering anyone, the CEO said firmly. You're a person going through a hard time. That's all. The student breathed out slowly. He felt a little lighter every time the man spoke. After a quiet moment, the CEO stood up and brushed the dust from his jeans. Come on, he said lightly. Walk with me. There's something I want to show you. The student stood and followed him across the yard, past the main barn and toward the back of the ranch. They walked along a dirt path that wound through tall grass. The sound of insects hummed softly around them. After a few minutes, they reached a small fenced area surrounded by trees. Inside were several young horses, still learning to be around people. These ones came from tough backgrounds, the CEO said, resting his arms on the fence. Some were abandoned. Some were hurt. Some just never had anyone who knew how to care for them. The student watched the horses. One of them, smaller than the others, stood off to the side, cautious. That one there, the CEO said, pointing gently, didn't trust anyone when he got here. Wouldn't come near us? Took weeks just to get him to stand still. But now, look at him. As if hearing his name, the little horse flicked an ear their way. The student smiled a little. He looks careful, the CEO agreed. But careful doesn't mean broken. Just means he needed more time. The student felt a sudden ache in his chest at those words. The CEO looked at him knowingly. You're a bit like him, I think. The student let out a tiny laugh, one that surprised him. Is that a good thing? It means you're strong, the CEO said, even if you don't feel like it. You survived things that would have crushed some people. You kept moving forward even when it hurt. That's strength." The student swallowed. It had been a long time since anyone had said something that kind to him. They stood there for a moment, watching the horses move gently through the small field. After a minute, the CEO said, "If things ever get heavy again, this place is open to you. You don't have to disappear into stress or exhaustion. You can call me. Come here. Clear your head." The student looked up, startled. "Really?" "Really," the CEO said without hesitation. "I meant what I said. You don't have to face everything alone." The student felt a pressure behind his eyes again, but he blinked it away. "Thank you," he whispered. "I don't even know how to repay you." "You don't have to repay kindness," the CEO said. "You just accept it. And someday, you pass it on to someone else who needs it." The student nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle somewhere, soft inside him. They spent the next hour helping the workers with small tasks. They weren't hard tasks carrying buckets, brushing one of the calmer horses, helping move hay. But doing them made the student feel grounded, like his mind had room to breathe. Every now and then, the CEO would glance at him to make sure he wasn't overwhelmed. He never hovered, never pressured, just kept it quiet, protective awareness. By the afternoon, the student felt steadier than he had in weeks. When they returned to the porch, the CEO brought out 2 glasses of cold lemonade, and they sat under the shade. "You've got a long journey ahead of you," the CEO said gently. "School, work, life, but I think you're going to be okay." The student looked at him, surprised again by the man's confidence. "You don't even know me that well," he said. The CEO smiled. "I know someone who was drowning yesterday and still had the courage to keep going today. That's enough." The student sat quietly with those words, letting them fill spaces he didn't know were empty. A few hours later, as the sun began lowering toward the horizon, the CEO walked with him to the truck. "You should get back before it gets too late," the man said softly. The student nodded, heart tight. "Thank you for everything, really." The CEO placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "You're always welcome here. Don't forget that." The student climbed into the truck, and as they drove toward the bus stop, he looked back at the ranch, its warm glow, the fields stretching far, the quiet safety it held. When they reached the stop, the CEO didn't rush him out. He waited until the student felt ready to step down. "Take care of yourself," the man said. "I will," the student promised. "And if the world gets too heavy," the student finished for him, smiling softly, "I know where to go." The CEO returned the smile. The student boarded the bus, found a seat by the window, and watched the ranch fade slowly behind him. He felt different, lighter, steadier, braver. He wasn't sure what challenges waited for him back in the city, but for the first time he believed he could face them. And deep in his heart, he carried the memory of the night he'd broken down. In the morning, he woke up somewhere safe. It was early morning on the ranch when the first hints of sunlight touched the wide fields, giving them that golden glow that made the place feel new all over again. The house was quiet at first, almost too quiet, but that kind of peace never lasted long. Everyone had grown used to days that started early and carried on with a mix of work, laughter, and unexpected moments that made life feel fuller than before. What no one knew was that this day would bring something different, something that tied together all the growth, all the challenges, and all the kindness that had been shared since everything began inside the house. The young man who once arrived unsure of himself woke up with a strange feeling. It wasn't fear, and it wasn't worry. It was more like awareness, like something was about to change again. He lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the journey that brought him here. There had been mistakes, misunderstandings, new friendships, and experiences he never thought he would have. Little by little, the ranch had become a place where he learned not only how to work hard, but how to trust himself. He finally stood up, stretched his arms, and stepped outside the small guest room. As he walked into the main hallway, he could smell something warm drifting through the air: fresh bread, brewed tea. In the simple comfort of a morning meal someone cared enough to make, the older ranch owner was already in the kitchen. Leaning slightly over the counter as he poured hot water into a teapot, he turned his head when he heard footsteps and gave a small smile. "Morning." The the man said in his calm voice that always carried a natural steadiness. "Morning," the young man replied softly. The ranch owner gestured toward the table. "Sit. You have a long day ahead. Thought you should start it right." The young man sat quietly, not sure yet what the older man meant by a long day, but he trusted him enough to wait and listen. The food was simple but good, and he appreciated the effort behind it. For a while they both ate without saying much. Silence between them had become comfortable like a language of its own. But eventually the older man cleared his throat and set his cup down. "I've been watching your progress," he said. "Not just with the chores or the animals, but everything. You've changed more than you think." The young man lowered his gaze, feeling a mix of shyness and pride. "You learned how to stay calm when things get tough. You learned how to be patient. And most of all, you learned how to treat people around you with respect and kindness. That's something not everyone figures out." He didn't know what to answer. He just nodded lightly. But the ranch owner continued, "Growth also means responsibility. And today I want to give you a chance to step into something bigger. Something that shows just how far you've come." The young man lifted his eyes, curiosity finally catching up. "There's a group of kids from the nearby school coming today," the ranch owner explained. "It's part of a program they do every few months. They bring students here to learn about animals, teamwork, and simple living. They need guidance, patience, and someone who knows how to show them things without making them feel small. I want you to help lead the activities today." The young man froze. "Me?" he asked. "Yes, you." The ranch owner smiled. "You're ready? More ready than you think." For a moment, doubt tried to rise in his chest. What if he disappointed everyone? What if he made mistakes? What if the kids didn't listen to him or felt bored? But then, he remembered the early days when he barely knew how to do anything. He remembered how the ranch owner guided him, never raising his voice, never making him feel useless. He remembered all the times he tried again after failing, how he eventually succeeded. Maybe he was ready. He took a slow breath. "Okay, I'll do my best." The ranch owner nodded. That's all anyone can ask for. By late morning, the school bus arrived, stirring excitement among the animals and filling the open yard with laughter and curious voices. The kids stepped out, carrying little bags, notebooks, and the wide-eyed energy children always brought with them. Some walked confidently. Others stayed close to their teacher. The young man felt nervous at first. But when the ranch owner placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder and whispered, "You've got this," something inside him settled. He stepped forward. "Hi, everyone," he said with a smile that grew more natural as he spoke. "Welcome to the ranch. We're going to learn some things together today, and I promise it's going to be fun." The kids immediately responded with excitement. A few waved. One asked where the horses were. Another wanted to know if there were chickens. He laughed softly and pointed toward the fields. "We'll see everything. But first, we're going to start with something simple. Let's meet the animals slowly so we don't scare them. They like calm people." He led the group around the ranch, showing them each area and explaining what the animals needed, how they were cared for, and how important patience was when working with them. The children listened closely. They asked questions, some smart, some silly, but he answered each one with kindness. When they reached the horses, the young girl hesitated, staying behind the rest. She seemed scared, her small hands holding tightly to the strap of her bag. He noticed immediately and knelt down to her height. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. She nodded but didn't step closer. "Horses are big, I know," he said softly. "I used to be scared of them too. But they can feel your emotions. If you're gentle with them, they'll be gentle with you. You can take your time. No rush." The girl looked at him, searching for reassurance. He offered a warm smile and held out his hand. "You don't have to touch them if you don't want to. But if you want to try, I'll stay right here with you. We'll do it together." Little by little, she stepped forward. The horse lowered its head, sensing her small presence. She reached out, hesitated for 1 second, then lightly touched the horse's nose. Her face lit up. "See?" he whispered. "Nothing to fear." She nodded eagerly and joined the rest of the group. Throughout the day, he helped them feed the animals, taught them how to clean the stalls, and showed them how working together made things easier. They laughed, competed playfully, enjoyed every simple task. But the biggest moment came when they sat in a circle under a shady tree. The ranch owner joined them quietly, watching how the young man handled everything. One of the boys asked, "Were you always good at this?" The young man smiled. "Not at all. When I first came here, I didn't know anything. I made mistakes all the time. But someone believed in me and taught me. So now I get to share what I learned with all of you." The ranch owner looked at him with quiet pride. Later in the afternoon, the teacher approached the ranch owner. "Your helper today is incredible," she whispered. "He connected with these kids better than most adults do. You can tell he truly cares." The ranch owner only smiled. When the bus finally arrived to take the students back, the kids waved goodbye, some shouting thank yous. Others saying they wanted to come back soon. The young man waved back, feeling a warm ache in his chest, a good ache, as the dust settled and the ranch grew quiet again. He turned to see the ranch owner standing with his arms crossed, studying him with a thoughtful expression. "You did well," the older man said. "Thank you," the young man replied. "No," the ranch owner said firmly. "You didn't just do well. You showed leadership, patience, and heart. Those kids trusted you because they saw your sincerity." He didn't know what to say. Praise still felt strange, but it also felt good. The ranch owner continued. "It's time you started thinking bigger. Not just about chores or learning, but about your future. You have potential to guide, to teach, to help others the way you were helped. Don't limit yourself." The young man stood there, processing the words. For the first time, he truly let himself imagine a future where he wasn't lost or uncertain. A future where he had purpose. "I'll try," he said softly. "You already are," the ranch owner replied, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned soft shades of orange and pink. They walked back toward the house. The bus ride back to the city was long, but the student didn't feel restless the way he usually did. He rested his head lightly against the window, watching the fields pass by like a slow-moving dream. Everything outside looked softer than usual, or maybe his heart was just calmer now. The ranch had done something to him, something he couldn't explain yet. He reached the city by evening. The usual noise, honking, and rushing crowds greeted him immediately. For a moment, he felt the old stress start to creep back into his chest, but then he closed his eyes and pictured the open fields, the young horses, and the CEO's steady voice telling him he wasn't weak. The memory felt like a gentle shield. When he got off the bus and walked toward his small apartment, he realized something important. He didn't feel alone anymore. The next few days moved normally, but with small changes. He woke up earlier, not because he had to, but because he wanted to start his day with more calm. He made simple breakfasts, something he hadn't bothered to do in weeks. And when he went to class, he didn't rush in with panic slamming against his ribs. He walked steadily, breathing like someone who knew he deserved to slow down.